The phone rang just as Michael Harper was stepping out of the shower, steam still curling in the bathroom air. His hands trembled as he grabbed the phone, ignoring the cold sweat that dotted his brow. The screen lit up with a name he hadn't seen in over 10 years, Detective James Walker. He swallowed hard, pressing the phone to his ear. "Hello, Michael." The voice on the other end was calm, almost too calm. "I need you to come down to the station. It's about your family." A chill ran down Michael's spine. He froze, his heart slamming against his ribs. "My family? What's wrong?" His voice cracked, betraying the fear he was trying to suppress. "We just need you to come down, Michael. It's important." The line clicked dead before he could respond. His fingers gripped the phone, now nothing more than a lifeless object in his hand. His mind raced, replaying the last few hours. He hadn't seen or spoken to his wife, Sarah, or his two kids, Emily and Jake, since breakfast. They'd gone about their routine, like any other day. But something felt off this time. Something wasn't right. Michael hurriedly dressed, his thoughts a chaotic mess. Detective Walker's call wasn't a simple check-in. It wasn't about the kind of thing that could be cleared up in a phone call. His stomach twisted with dread as he walked out of the house, the weight of his own thoughts threatening to crush him. It was barely noon when Michael pulled into the police station. He'd never been inside before, not even when he was a teenager getting into trouble. The feeling of being here, under these circumstances, felt suffocating. "Mr. Harper." A uniformed officer greeted him at the door, his face unreadable. "Detective Walker's waiting for you." As Michael followed the officer down the sterile, white-walled hallway, his heartbeat echoed in his ears. The suspense in the air was thick, like a tension-filled movie scene where you know the worst is coming but can't look away. The detective's office was modest, papers stacked in disorganized piles on a desk, and a few chairs scattered around the room. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting an eerie glow over the space. Detective James Walker stood at the window, looking out at the overcast sky, his back turned. Michael felt a shiver as the door clicked shut behind him. "You asked me to come down," Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What's going on? Is everything okay with Sarah and the kids?" Walker turned, his face unreadable. "Mr. Harper," he began slowly, "there's something I need to ask you." Michael's stomach clenched. "What is it? What happened?" The detective stepped closer, a manila folder in his hands. "We're investigating a double homicide, a mother and her two children." The world spun. Michael's legs nearly buckled beneath him. His breath caught in his throat. No, you've got it wrong," he stammered, shaking his head. That can't be. My family. I'm sorry, Mr. Harper, but we found the bodies this morning. The scene, it was gruesome. Your wife, Sarah, and your two children, Emily and Jake, were." "No." The word fell from Michael's lips like a dead weight. You're lying." His head spun, the room blurring in and out of focus. "I was just with them this morning. We had breakfast. Walker set the folder down in front of him, opening it. Michael saw the photographs, images of his wife, her face pale and lifeless, and his children, their small, innocent faces frozen in terror. His stomach turned violently. How could this happen? Michael's voice broke as his hand shot up to cover his mouth. "I don't understand. What the hell happened? Who did this?" "That's what we're trying to figure out." Walker's voice was firm, but there was a glint of suspicion in his eyes. "We're running the investigation, Mr. Harper, but something about this doesn't sit right." Michael shook his head, stumbling back. "What do you mean? Are you accusing me?" The detective's eyes met his. There was something hidden beneath the surface, something Michael couldn't quite place. "We're not accusing anyone yet," Walker said. "But there are things we need to know. Your alibi, your relationship with Sarah and the kids. It's all part of the investigation." Michael's blood ran cold. "I don't know what you're talking about. I love my family. Then why the hell were you absent the last few weeks?" The question hit Michael like a slap in the face. "Where were you last night, Michael? Why were you avoiding calls from Sarah? Why didn't you check on her when we saw her car parked out front this morning?" Michael froze. the words like knives slicing through his chest. He hadn't realized how much time had passed since he last truly spoke to Sarah, really spoke to her. Weeks, maybe months of silence. They had been drifting apart for so long, but he never thought it would come to this. But the truth was staring him in the face now, and it was more suffocating than any pain he had ever felt. There was no denying it. He was a stranger to his own family. The detective's voice softened. "We just need to know, Michael. What happened? Did something snap? Did something go wrong?" Michael's head spun. He needed answers, but the only thing that echoed in his mind was the terror that had flickered in his family's eyes the last time he had seen them, the growing distance between him and Sarah, and the nagging feeling that he was losing control of everything. It was the plot twist that Michael hadn't anticipated. The events of that morning, the breakfast with his kids, the brief exchange with Sarah, the empty promises he had made to himself to be better. None of it had mattered. He realized, in that moment, that he hadn't just failed his family in the last few weeks. He had failed them for years. The cold weight of realization hit him harder than any murder investigation could. It wasn't just that he was the last person to see his family alive. It was that he had been the one to let them slip away from him. And the darkest part of him wondered, had he somehow pushed them away to this point? Was this his fault? Could he have been the cause of the very thing he feared the most? Detective Walker stood up and placed a hand on Michael's shoulder, his voice low. "You need to start talking, Michael. This is your chance to explain." But the man who stood there, broken and shattered, couldn't find the words, because deep down, he knew he might not even understand what had happened, or why he had let everything spiral so far out of control. In that quiet moment, Michael Harper realized he was already trapped, not just by the crime he couldn't remember committing, but by a life he had built so perfectly. It could destroy everything he loved without warning. The emotional twist here is that while Michael thought the investigation would focus on finding the killer, he begins to realize that he may have been complicit in the downfall of his family, possibly leading to something darker. The realization that his emotional neglect could have driven him to a breaking point. The following morning, the air inside the interrogation room was cold, sterile, almost suffocating. Michael Harper sat with his hands clasped tightly in his lap, his knuckles white. He hadn't spoken a word since Detective Walker had left the room to grab another officer. The silence gnawed at him, making every second feel like an eternity. He wanted answers. He needed to understand what had happened to his family. But every time he tried to connect the dots, they slipped further away, like pieces of a puzzle with no image to guide him. He could still see Sarah's face in his mind, her soft smile that used to warm him in the mornings, the way she would laugh when he tried to make pancakes for the kids. Had he really let that slip away? His thoughts spiraled downward, and a headache began to form at the back of his skull. He had no idea how he had gotten here, why he was sitting in a police station with the weight of his family's deaths pressing down on him. Just then, the door opened with a creak, and Detective Walker walked in. His expression was serious, but there was something else there, something Michael couldn't place. It wasn't just suspicion, it was doubt, mixed with an almost strange empathy. "Mr. Harper," Walker said, his voice steady. "I know this is hard, but we need to piece together what happened. Your memory's going to be important for us to figure out how things went so wrong." Michael lifted his eyes to meet the detective's, feeling the pull of something heavy. The detective pulled out a chair and sat across from him, opening his notebook. "We need to go through last night, Michael. Where were you between 9 p.m. and midnight?" Michael swallowed. I was home. Just working on some reports for my job. Nothing special. The usual stuff. You didn't make any phone calls. Didn't try to contact your family?" Michael paused, recalling the unease he had felt last night when he returned home late from the office. He remembered his wife's absence, her not being there when he arrived, but he had dismissed it as her just being busy with the kids. "No, I didn't make any calls," Michael said, his voice shaky. "I didn't think anything was wrong. Did you notice anything odd? Any strange behavior from your wife, Sarah? From Emily or Jake?" Michael hesitated, trying to recall. His mind was a fog of half-formed images and fleeting thoughts, each one tangled with guilt and confusion. The previous evening hadn't felt out of place at the time, but now that he was thinking about it, everything felt off. Sarah had been distant lately, but he thought that was just stress from work. Jake had been unusually quiet. Emily, their little artist, had spent the whole evening sketching, barely acknowledging him when he said goodbye to her. There had been tension in the house, but it was normal, wasn't it? I don't know, Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. Everything seemed normal. I didn't think much of it. Walker's gaze never wavered, but you do now. You're starting to think there might have been something you missed, aren't you? Michael's heart raced. I don't know. The detective leaned forward slightly, his voice softening. Sometimes, Michael, the smallest things can reveal the biggest truths. You said you didn't talk to your family much in the days leading up to their deaths. Why is that? What happened? Michael opened his mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. Instead, his mind flashed back to his wife's face one final time, the way she had looked at him just days before, as though she were on the verge of saying something important but never quite found the words. Maybe I've just been busy, Michael said, avoiding the truth. Maybe I just didn't pay enough attention. Walker's eyes narrowed. Maybe. Or maybe you've been avoiding something for a long time. Michael felt a knot form in his stomach. The detective's words seemed to pull the lid off of Pandora's box that Michael didn't want to open. The strain between him and Sarah hadn't been anything new. They'd been drifting apart for months, maybe years. He'd been distracted by work, and Sarah had been distracted by something too. He hadn't wanted to think about it, but now, the pieces seemed to fall into place. Detective, I wasn't the best husband, Michael admitted, his voice breaking. I wasn't there for Sarah when she needed me. I wasn't there for my kids. I thought it was all going to be okay, that it would just work itself out. But now your family's gone. Walker finished his sentence quietly. And the only thing left is what you remember and what you didn't. Suddenly, the door slammed open, and a uniformed officer burst in, holding a file in his hands. His expression was grave, and the tension in the room thickened instantly. Detective, we've got something, the officer said, holding the file out. We found something at the scene. It's going to change everything. Walker stood up, taking the file. What is it? The officer hesitated, his gaze flickering toward Michael before speaking. There was a note, Detective. A letter. It was on the kitchen counter, addressed to Michael Harper, but it wasn't from Sarah. Michael's stomach lurched. A note? From someone else? The detective opened the file, scanning the contents quickly before locking eyes with Michael. His face was unreadable. It says, "It's not your fault, but you were the one who broke us." Michael's heart stopped. His breath caught in his throat as the words hit him like a truck. What did that mean? You were the one who broke us. His mind raced. Who could have written that? Sarah? No, it didn't make sense. She had been quiet, yes, but she wouldn't have said something like that. Not when they had shared so much, had they? The plot thickened. Who had sent the note and why? Was it a final message from Sarah? Or was there someone else involved? Someone who had been hiding in the shadows all this time? Walker watched Michael closely, his gaze sharp. Do you recognize the handwriting, Michael? Or have any idea who might have written this? Michael's mind was a blur, trying to piece everything together, but it was like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. The words burned in his brain. No, I don't know. Well, we're going to find out. But in the meantime, Walker said, his tone hardening, there's one thing I need to know, and I need you to be honest with me. Is there anyone else, Michael? Anyone who could have wanted to hurt your family? The question hit Michael like a slap in the face. His body went cold. His thoughts scrambled to find an answer, but deep down, a horrifying realization crept up on him. Maybe there was someone else, someone he hadn't thought of, someone who had been there all along, just waiting to tear his family apart. As the detective stared at him, the room seemed to close in, and for the first time since the tragedy had begun, Michael Harper felt the walls around him closing in. The note left at the crime scene. It's not your fault, but you were the one who broke us. Isn't from Sarah, nor is it simply a confession. It's a clue that points to a deeper, darker mystery. Michael realizes that there might be someone outside of his family who was involved in their deaths, someone he hadn't even considered. The emotional twist comes when Michael begins to question whether his own negligence and broken relationship with Sarah could have allowed someone else to manipulate the situation, adding layers of guilt and regret to his already fractured state of mind. The following days felt like a blur. The weight of the interrogation, the officer's cryptic note, and the haunting realization that someone beyond his own family might have been involved in their deaths were suffocating Michael. He couldn't think straight. Each moment was like a puzzle piece that didn't fit, and every time he thought he had a lead, the truth seemed further out of reach. The hours were long, the silence was deafening, and the walls in his apartment felt like they were closing in on him. But Detective Walker wasn't giving up. He was relentless, and it was clear that the case had taken a dark turn, something Michael wasn't prepared for. It was late when Walker called. Michael's phone lit up, his screen reflecting the harsh glow of the night. The detective's name flashed across the display. Harper. Walker's voice came through, urgent, almost out of breath. I need you to come down to the station. We've got something. Michael's heart skipped a beat. What is it? It's a lead, but I can't talk about it over the phone. Just get here as fast as you can. Michael didn't question it. The dread in Walker's voice was enough. He threw on his jacket and made his way to the police station, his mind racing with possibilities. Was this it? Was this the breakthrough they had been waiting for? Or was it just another dead end? When he arrived, Walker was waiting for him in a small conference room, the same grim look on his face. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Sit down, Walker said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. Michael complied, his hands cold, his throat dry. What's going on, Detective? Walker slid a file across the table, the pages inside thick with photographs and documents. We've been going through the evidence, Harper, and we found something that doesn't add up, something we missed before. Michael opened the file. His hand shook slightly as he flicked through the pages. There were crime scene photos of the house, the bloodstains, the broken furniture, the disarray. But then, there was something else. A photograph of Sarah, taken at a family gathering months before the murders. It was a candid shot of her smiling, holding Emily and Jake, her eyes sparkling. But something in the photo caught Michael's attention. In the background, barely visible, was a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the frame. He leaned in closer, his heart pounding. Who's that? Walker's expression remained stoic. We don't know yet, but it's not anyone we've identified from your family. It's not one of your friends or colleagues either. We ran it through the system, but nothing came up. That's where the twist comes in, Michael. This person was there, and they were watching, from the shadows. Michael's mind reeled. But why would they be there? And why didn't I see them? Walker didn't answer directly. Instead, he flipped to another page in the file. It was a list of emails, text messages, and phone logs, all relating to Sarah's communications in the weeks leading up to the murders. Michael had already seen the texts between Sarah and him, the ones filled with tension and unspoken hurt. But these were different. These were found in her email account, Walker said, his voice darkening. There were several messages, but none of them were sent to you. They were sent to someone named Evan. Michael's throat tightened. Evan? I don't know anyone by that name. Walker's eyes narrowed. We didn't think you did. But Sarah was emailing him, back and forth. These weren't simple messages, either. They were long, emotional exchanges, almost as if they were planning something. Michael's pulse quickened. A secret. Sarah had been keeping something from him. He had known there had been distance between them. But this felt like a betrayal. His mind tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a friend from work, someone who could offer advice during their rough patch. But deep down, he knew it wasn't that simple. Who was Evan? Michael's voice cracked. Walker hesitated before answering. We're still working on that, but we did some digging. There was an Evan in Sarah's life years ago. Before you. They were in a relationship, but it ended poorly. And there's one thing we've learned. Evan never really went away. The words hit Michael like a freight train. An ex-boyfriend, Sarah's past was something he had never pried into. Their relationship had been built on the future, on the family they were creating. But now, as Walker spoke, Michael realized there were shadows from Sarah's past that were still lingering, and perhaps they had come back to haunt her and him. Walker continued, his voice lower. We think Evan might be the one who sent that note we found at the scene." Michael's head spun. "Wait, you mean Evan might have written that note? The one that said, 'You were the one who broke us'?" Walker nodded. "It's possible. And if that's the case, then Evan was involved in something far darker than we thought." Michael's chest tightened. His mind went back to the last conversation he had with Sarah, the last moment he had with her. She had been distant, yes, but she had seemed resigned, almost as if she were preparing for something, or maybe someone. But why didn't she tell him? Why didn't she say something, anything? Suddenly, it all clicked. The tension, the secrets, the emotional distance. Sarah had been trying to protect him, protect their family, from something she never spoke about. But why? What had she been hiding? As if reading his mind, Walker leaned forward, his voice low and tense. "Michael, I think you need to prepare yourself. If Evan was involved, we could be looking at a motive much darker than just a family tragedy. This might be something bigger than what we've seen so far." Michael sat back, trying to process it all. His life, his entire world, had been shattered, and now the pieces seemed to form a new picture, one he wasn't ready for. He had thought he knew his wife, his family, inside and out, but now he was questioning everything. "Who is he, Detective?" Michael asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why would he do this? Walker's gaze hardened. "That's what we're going to find out. But you need to be ready for the truth, Michael. Sometimes, the truth is darker than we can imagine." Michael swallowed hard. Darker. That word echoed in his mind as the walls of the room seemed to close in even tighter. He wasn't ready for what was to come. But one thing was clear now. His family's death wasn't the result of a simple domestic tragedy. It was the product of something far more sinister, something hidden in the shadows of the past. And Michael was about to uncover the full extent of it. The shadowy figure in the photo isn't just a stranger. It's a symbol of Sarah's past, someone who had been lurking in the background for years, someone Michael had never suspected. This revelation leads Michael down a path of uncovering Sarah's secret life, including her emotional connection to Evan, an ex-boyfriend from her past who was now tied to the tragic events surrounding her death. The emotional twist comes when Michael realizes that his wife may have been trying to protect him, to shield him from the dark legacy of her past, even as it consumed her, and ultimately their family. Michael had spent the past few days drowning in confusion, trying to piece together fragments of a puzzle he had never signed up to solve. Each new discovery left him feeling more alienated from his wife, more distanced from the life they had shared. But nothing prepared him for what Walker said next. The detective called him early one morning. Michael had barely slept, his mind replaying everything he'd learned so far. The mysterious figure in the photo, the cryptic messages between Sarah and Evan, the cold note left at the scene of the crime. But what Walker told him shattered his world even further. "I need you to come to the station. Now," Walker said, urgency heavy in his voice. "We found something new. Something troubling." Michael's pulse quickened. "What is it?" "You need to see it for yourself. Just get here as fast as you can." This was no longer just about uncovering the truth about his family's deaths. It was about finding out how far back this mystery stretched, and how deeply it had been hidden. When Michael arrived at the station, Walker was waiting, his expression grave. "We've been digging deeper into Evan," Walker began. "We couldn't find much at first, but now we've traced his movements. We know where he was before your wife died." Michael's heart hammered in his chest. "What do you mean? Where was he?" Walker slid a folder across the table, filled with more documents and photos. "He was right here in town. He visited your house several times in the weeks before the murders. We have surveillance footage from the day before Sarah died. He was on your street, Michael. And there's something else." Michael looked at Walker, a knot tightening in his stomach. "What else?" Walker hesitated, his gaze shifting to the side before meeting Michael's eyes. Evan had a criminal record. He's been in and out of prison for years. Petty theft, assault, but there's something bigger. He's connected to a gang that's been operating in the area for a long time. Michael's mind raced. A gang. But Sarah didn't know anything about that. She would have never. "I don't think she knew everything either, Michael," Walker interrupted. I think Evan dragged her into something darker than you can imagine. A chilling thought gripped Michael's chest. What if Sarah had been trying to protect him, trying to keep him away from the dangerous life Evan had pulled her into? What if her attempts to shield him from the truth had led to her death? Walker leaned forward. We traced the last phone call Sarah made. It was to Evan, the night she died. Michael froze. His mouth went dry. The night she died? Yes, just hours before she was killed, Sarah called him. We don't know what they talked about, but we know she was scared, and we think she was trying to get away from him, from whatever mess he dragged her into. Michael's world spun. He tried to understand, to process the words coming out of Walker's mouth. It didn't make sense. Sarah had never shown signs of fear, never once hinted at something that would put them in danger. But now, the pieces were coming together in ways he hadn't expected. Why didn't she tell me? Michael whispered, more to himself than to Walker. His voice was thick with emotion. Why didn't she tell me what was really going on? Walker didn't answer immediately. He just looked at Michael with a knowing, weary expression. Finally, he spoke. Maybe she didn't want to burden you. Maybe she thought she could fix it herself. Or maybe she didn't want to drag you into a mess she couldn't get out of. Michael's chest tightened, and for the first time in days, he allowed himself to feel something other than anger and confusion, a deep, aching sorrow. He'd spent so many years thinking that he was the one who needed to protect Sarah, that he was the one who needed to be strong for their family. But now he saw the cracks in the life they'd built, cracks Sarah had tried to hide from him, cracks that had been there all along. And now, Michael asked, his voice low, what does this mean? What's the next step? Walker sighed. We've got more questions than answers. But here's what we know for sure. Evan was involved in something much bigger than we realized. And if Sarah tried to get out, it's possible that The door to the office creaked open, and a uniformed officer stepped in, interrupting the conversation. Walker's gaze hardened, and he gestured for the officer to speak. Detective, the officer said, his voice tense. We've got a lead. It's about Evan. Michael's heart leapt in his chest. Could this be the breakthrough they needed? Could this be the piece of the puzzle that finally made sense of everything? Tell me, Walker said, standing up. The officer handed him a thick file, which Walker quickly skimmed through. His face grew darker as he read, his eyes flicking back and forth between the officer and Michael. This is bad, Walker said quietly. Evan was found dead. They found his body this morning. Looks like he was executed, shot at close range. Michael blinked, stunned. What? You're saying he's dead? Yes, Walker replied. But here's the thing. We found something on him. A note that was addressed to you, Michael. Michael's blood ran cold. A note? From Evan. But how? The officer handed Walker the note, and Walker slowly read it aloud. You don't know everything, Michael. You think you're in control, but you're just a pawn. This is bigger than you know. She knew. She always knew. The words hit Michael like a freight train. His mind spun, but something deep within him told him this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. She knew. Michael muttered under his breath. She knew about all of this. Walker met his gaze. His eyes filled with a mixture of sympathy and caution. Michael, this is just getting started. The truth is darker than we ever thought. The emotional twist hit hard. Sarah hadn't just been protecting Michael from Evan. She had been protecting him from the truth about her past, the things she had been trying to keep buried. But now, with Evan dead and the note in Michael's hands, the past had caught up with them both. Michael was left standing in that cold room, the weight of the truth pressing down on him. His wife had been hiding a life that was far more complicated and dangerous than he could have ever imagined. And now, that life had cost her everything, and it was about to cost him too. Evan's unexpected death and the discovery of a note addressed to Michael reveal that the conflict wasn't just about Sarah's relationship with him. It was about a far larger, more dangerous situation that Sarah had been caught in, one that Michael hadn't even begun to comprehend. The emotional twist comes when Michael realizes that Sarah's attempt to protect him from this world was far more complicated than he had ever imagined, and the truth he had been seeking was much darker than he could have ever prepared for. The following morning, the air inside the interrogation room was cold, sterile, almost suffocating. Michael Harper sat with his hands clasped tightly in his lap, his knuckles white. He hadn't spoken a word since Detective Walker had left the room to grab another officer. The silence gnawed at him, making every second feel like an eternity. He wanted answers. He needed to understand what had happened to his family. But every time he tried to connect the dots, they slipped further away, like pieces of a puzzle with no image to guide him. He could still see Sarah's face in his mind, her soft smile that used to warm him in the mornings, the way she would laugh when he tried to make pancakes for the kids. Had he really let that slip away? His thoughts spiraled downward, and a headache began to form at the back of his skull. He had no idea how he had gotten here, why he was sitting in a police station with the weight of his family's deaths pressing down on him. Just then, the door opened with a creak, and Detective Walker walked in. His expression was serious, but there was something else there, something Michael couldn't place. It wasn't just suspicion, it was doubt, mixed with an almost strange empathy. "Mr. Harper," Walker said, his voice steady, "I know this is hard, but we need to piece together what happened. Your memory's going to be important for us to figure out how things went so wrong." Michael lifted his eyes to meet the detective's, feeling the pull of something heavy. The detective pulled out a chair and sat across from him, opening his notebook. "We need to go through last night, Michael. Where were you between 9 p.m. and midnight?" Michael swallowed. I was home. Just working on some reports for my job. Nothing special. The usual stuff. You didn't make any phone calls. Didn't try to contact your family?" Michael paused, recalling the unease he had felt last night when he returned home late from the office. He remembered his wife's absence, her not being there when he arrived, but he had dismissed it as her just being busy with the kids. "No, I didn't make any calls," Michael said, his voice shaky. "I didn't think anything was wrong. Did you notice anything odd? Any strange behavior from your wife, Sarah? From Emily or Jake?" Michael hesitated, trying to recall. His mind was a fog of half-formed images and fleeting thoughts, each one tangled with guilt and confusion. The previous evening hadn't felt out of place at the time, but now that he was thinking about it, everything felt off. Sarah had been distant lately, but he thought that was just stress from work. Jake had been unusually quiet. Emily, the little artist, had spent the whole evening sketching, barely acknowledging him when he said goodbye to her. There had been tension in the house, but it was normal, wasn't it? "I don't know," Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Everything seemed normal. I didn't think much of it." Walker's gaze never wavered. "But you do now. You're starting to think there might have been something you missed, aren't you?" Michael's heart raced. I don't know." The detective leaned forward slightly, his voice softening. "Sometimes, Michael, the smallest things can reveal the biggest truths. You said you didn't talk to your family much in the days leading up to their deaths. Why is that? What happened?" Michael opened his mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. Instead, his mind flashed back to his wife's face one final time, the way she had looked at him just days before, as though she were on the verge of saying something important but never quite found the words. "Maybe I've just been busy," Michael said, avoiding the truth. "Maybe I just didn't pay enough attention." Walker's eyes narrowed. "Maybe. Or maybe you've been avoiding something for a long time." Michael felt a knot form in his stomach. The detective's words seemed to pull the lid off of Pandora's box that Michael didn't want to open. The strain between him and Sarah hadn't been anything new. They'd been drifting apart for months, maybe years. He'd been distracted by work, and Sarah had been distracted by something too. He hadn't wanted to think about it, but now, the pieces seemed to fall into place. "Detective, I wasn't the best husband," Michael admitted, his voice breaking. "I wasn't there for Sarah when she needed me. I wasn't there for my kids. I thought it was all going to be okay, that it would just work itself out. But now your family's gone." Walker finished his sentence quietly. "And the only thing left is what you remember and what you didn't." Suddenly, the door slammed open, and a uniformed officer burst in, holding a file in his hands. His expression was grave, and the tension in the room thickened instantly. "Detective, we've got something," the officer said, holding the file out. "We found something at the scene. It's going to change everything." Walker stood up, taking the file. "What is it?" The days after Walker's revelation felt like an eternity to Michael. Each passing hour dragged, weighed down by the constant replay of the note, Evan's death, and the realization that everything he thought he knew about his family was built on a lie. The walls of his apartment had begun to close in, the silence louder than ever. But something in him refused to let it go. He needed answers, and he needed them now. Walker had told him to lay low, to stop digging, but Michael couldn't. Every corner he turned seemed to raise more questions, and now, more than ever, he was determined to uncover the truth. The pieces of the puzzle were scattered, but one thing kept drawing his focus: that note. It was the key, but to what? In his quiet moments, Michael sat at his kitchen table, the note from Evan in front of him. He read it over and over, trying to make sense of the cryptic words. "You don't know everything, Michael. You think you're in control, but you're just a pawn. This is bigger than you know." She knew. She always knew. Every time he read it, his stomach tightened with dread. What did it all mean? The pain of losing Sarah was still raw, but a new kind of ache was growing, the ache of betrayal. He'd never fully understood his wife's past, the layers of secrets she had carried with her. He thought he knew her better than anyone, but now he was starting to question everything. Had she been living a double life? Was she somehow involved in something darker than he could imagine? Could her death have been the result of something she had done, or something she had failed to escape? It wasn't until late one night, after another fruitless search for answers, that Michael stumbled upon something he wasn't ready for. He had been sifting through old documents, trying to find any clue about Evan's past, when he came across something buried deep in a forgotten drawer. It was an old photo album, one he didn't remember seeing before. He flipped through the pages, at first looking for any traces of family memories, things that might ground him in the normalcy they had once shared. But the further he flipped, the more unsettling the images became. In one of the photographs, Sarah stood with a man Michael didn't recognize. They were close, almost too close, their hands touching in a way that sent a chill down his spine. Michael stared at the photo, his heart pounding in his chest. The man was none other than Frank Booker, the same Frank Booker who had once offered Evan a job and who had been the last person to talk to Sarah before her death. But that wasn't the only thing that stood out. In the background of the picture, partially obscured, was another figure, a figure who had been in the shadows during every other photograph. Never quite visible, but always present Evan. He had been there. Always. Michael's mind raced. What was going on here? The photo, the connection to Frank Booker, and now Evan's name being tied to it all. It was too much to ignore. Suddenly, a memory surfaced, one that sent a sharp jolt of recognition through him. He recalled Sarah once telling him about a project she had been working on, something related to her work in real estate. She had been unusually secretive about it, mentioning only that it was high stakes and that she didn't want him involved. She had always been tight-lipped about the details. Had she been in over her head? The weight of the realization hit him like a freight train. She wasn't just trying to protect me from Evan. She had been trying to protect him from something far more dangerous, something she had gotten herself caught up in, something she couldn't get out of. But the more Michael uncovered, the more the pieces fit into a disturbing pattern. Frank Booker, Evan, the photo, it all pointed to the same thing. His wife had been involved in a dangerous business, and she hadn't been able to break free. His hand shook as he reached for his phone. The only person who might have the answers was Walker, and even though he had kept his distance for days, now he had to know. He dialed Walker's number, the sound of the ringing filling the tense silence of his apartment. "Detective Walker," came the familiar voice after several rings. "Walker, I need you to meet me," Michael said, urgency lacing his voice. "I think I figured it out. It's worse than I thought." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Where?" "Meet me at the old storage unit, the one near the docks. I have proof. You need to see this." The moment he hung up, a cold sense of dread settled over him. The truth had been slipping through his fingers like sand, but now he had it. He had the missing piece that would bring it all crashing down. Later that night, Michael stood outside the storage unit, his breath coming out in sharp puffs in the cold night air. The place was dimly lit, by a flickering overhead light, and the sound of his footsteps echoed in the silence. He waited for Walker, who had promised to meet him there. The anticipation gnawed at him, his mind replaying the details over and over. The photo, Frank Booker, Evan, it's all connected. It has to be. A car pulled up in the distance, its headlights briefly blinding him as it slowed to a stop. Walker emerged from the car, his expression unreadable. He looked around before approaching Michael. "What do you have, Michael?" Walker asked. Michael didn't respond immediately. He led the detective to the storage unit, unlocked it, and pulled the heavy door open with a creak. Inside, on the far wall, a dusty stack of boxes sat undisturbed. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and stale cardboard. "Here," Michael said, his voice tight. He reached for one of the boxes and pulled it down. "I found this." As he opened the box, the contents spilled out: papers, documents, and files. There, amid the clutter, was the final piece, ledger. It was old, yellowed with age, but it was unmistakable. The names in it, Frank Booker, Sarah's name, Evan's name. It was all there, along with cryptic notations that seemed to imply a business deal gone wrong, a deal that had spiraled into murder. Walker's face grew pale as he sifted through the pages. His hand stopped at a particular note. This changes everything," Walker murmured. He looked up at Michael, his expression full of disbelief. Sarah was involved in something that went far beyond what we knew. "But why didn't she tell you?" Michael's throat tightened. "She was protecting me," he said quietly, his voice breaking. "She was protecting all of us from something bigger than we could have ever imagined." Walker looked down at the papers in his hands, then back at Michael. "You're sure now, aren't you?" Sarah was trying to break free, and someone made sure she couldn't. Michael's eyes burned with unshed tears, the weight of the truth finally crashing down on him. She wasn't just my wife. She was caught in a web that was far too dangerous. And now I need to make sure this stops. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The truth had finally been revealed, but Michael felt no relief. There was only the bitter taste of loss, of a love betrayed by secrets that had cost him everything. Michael finally realizes that Sarah's death wasn't just the result of a failed escape from her abusive relationship with Evan. It was a deeper, more calculated betrayal involving business dealings that put her life in danger. The weight of the truth hits him when he understands that his wife was trying to protect him from a world he never knew existed. The ledger reveals that Frank Booker and several others were part of a much larger criminal operation that had been manipulating Sarah, using her to cover up their crimes. Her death was orchestrated to silence her before she could expose the network. What do you think Sarah's final decision would have been if she had lived? Would she have escaped the web of lies? Or was her fate sealed from the beginning? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.